Welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed your holiday. I didn't really have an eventful one. I've been kind of tied up with a research project that I'm doing, uh, an independent research project, I'd say. So it's been a bit overwhelming, I'll tell you. Uh, I think eventually you guys will probably know what I'm talking about. But I figured because I'd gotten part of it done yesterday, I would do the TGIF stream early today, and that way we wouldn't be constrained, and I'd have to leave at the end and end it pretty abruptly like I usually have. So we're going to start with a story out of Venezuela now. Now, this is not really a new story. It turns out it's just been translated into English. The original story was in Mangabay in Spanish. So, not to forget what's going down over in Venezuela. We're not really only talking about the effects of a totalitarian government on a country that was once one of the premier economies of Latin America. It's also on the native people of Latin America, Latin America, but specifically Venezuela itself. These three different indigenous peoples over there, the Hodi and what were the other ones? The Yanomami and the Piauroa. Basically, President Maduro is encroaching on their land. He has what's being called the Orinoco mining arc. This is something I've covered before. It bears repeating simply for the fact that we're talking about people on the left supporting Nicolas Maduro, and at the same time, this is how they talk out of both sides of their mouths. They want to support a person because he's quote unquote independent from America, because he is striking on his own path, as they say, and they feel that this person, because he hates the United States, he's an appropriate symbol of resistance against imperialism. But in the same breath, they'll talk about the treatment that we give to our indigenous people here in the U.S., which I would be the first person to say has been wrong. And they will talk about how it destroys habitats, and there was the the Dakota Access Pipeline. If you remember, Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, they were all for protests over there. But you will never hear a murmur about what's going on over in Venezuela when a lot of these tribes are actually more isolated than the Standing Rock Sioux, which is it's a hard comparison to make. But we're talking about people who are having literally it's not a pipeline going through their water or near to their water source, which is what was happening over in South Dakota, which, there's issues with that as well. This is actually mining for gold, coltan, and diamonds on their lands, and they're not getting anything out of it. All they're getting out of it, by the way, is cases of the measles, and several of them have died because first of all, they don't have any immunity to it, and whether you believe in vaccines or not, they're not vaccinated, and they're just dying in pretty bad numbers for that. The Pan American Health Organization said as of May 17th, there were 513 confirmed cases of measles and 62 deaths among the country's indigenous people, including 150 cases in Amazonas and Bolivar. So we're really talking about all of these so-called benefits of the Bolivarian Revolution are nothing but a pile of deceptions. They're not getting health. They don't have rights to their lands. They're not getting any wealth from the minerals. They probably don't even care for the wealth because they're indigenous tribes. So essentially all of the different excuses that the evil capitalist countries like us make about, there needs to be progress, there needs to be, the economy needs this, where we need to be able to develop our country for the better of everyone. Those same excuses are being made down there, but in the name of the Bolivarian 21st century socialism. So people will ignore this, or they'll say, well, Venezuela is not real socialism, but we still support Venezuela because they're standing up to imperialism. No, Venezuela's government is. It's infected by the same evils and the same desire for power and wealth that every other government around the world is. Okay, and that's why you should not believe these people from Code Pink or from the Gray Zone or Alternet or whatever these left-wing sites are, because their non-interventionism is conditional. My non-interventionism, of course, is not conditional in the same way. I don't really want America to go to war with Iran because I think it's a bad decision. Not because I support the government of Iran. They do. They support the government of Iran for a very simple condition, because they don't like our country. They don't like the United States. They want the U.S. to be transformed in their image to become the so-called equal society that they've always wanted. And that's about the extent of their thought. Then they start going into a lot of dialectic and nonsense about what's the correct way, and do you need a vanguard party, and what's the role of the industrial class, and what's the role of the peasantry, and all that bullshit, while they're extracting gold and coltan from Indians' land. That's the real face of the international left, and that's why I'm not going to stop featuring these stories, even if there's a little bit of less of an emphasis. There's also not that much news coming out of Venezuela. And unfortunately, I think a while back I was sort of blackpilled about this situation because, people have told me there simply is no legitimate alternative to Nicolas Maduro, because all the people who would have been, good contenders have either left the country or they're in detention, and they're just not a country that's they're ready to fight a war. And in fact, I believe the last time Venezuela was involved in a war was in the 1830s. So yeah, it's not a war-making country. It's not exactly Prussia. If there's a person I know who's like really obsessed with Prussia. So anyway, welcome to Mad Dodge and Memes and Larry and everybody else who's watching but not in the chat yet. We're going to talk about various topics today. Going to be a little bit of an emphasis on the Democratic primaries. Also, another brief story I want to touch on overseas before we get into that. So there was a police shooting over in Israel of an Ethiopian man. And apparently there are allegations that there are riots that have developed since then. And I think that it's important to cover these stories because there's not a lot of people that you can ask questions at. I know some of you in the chat. For example, Mad Dodge I've talked to personally. So if you ask a news source, or if you ask a person who's an opinion maker on Israeli policies, they'll probably be slanted to one side or another, and they are very likely trying to promote their vision of what the country should be like. Not many people are willing to admit that they don't have a fucking clue what to do or how to really cope with complicated situations over there. So some people will say, this is an example, after all, of the problems with Ethiopian immigrants in Israel, that they're not well adjusted, they're clustered in urban areas. The government hasn't really done well to integrate them into society. And this shooting, which I've heard various versions of what happened, and some of those are simply rumors that I can't confirm. One rumor is that the person who was shot is a juvenile criminal who was rejected. He was rejected even from military service. He'd been fighting with another kid, actually been bullying another kid, and that the cop was off duty. That's something that is, not disputed. And he'd been with his family at a playground nearby, and then he came up, and then there was an altercation, and then he shot the guy. So there are rumors that the cop was an Arab Israeli. So those of you that don't know, the police force is fully integrated over there. So you have police of all different ethnicities. And those rumors, I think, so some people will try to say, well, this is all the work of the left. This is all people, people trying to divide society. The fact is that society, it typically is divided, okay? There's no way to, cluster people of different backgrounds and different, different tendencies, different opinions into one solid block unless you indoctrinate them. And that's not really the way society works over there. There is a free press. There's actually a lot of dissident people over there that are very critical of the government. They just don't seem to be very popular. So there was rioting for the past couple days over there. This was in Kiryat Chaim, which is pretty close to Haifa. I used to live in Haifa, but not very close to here. And it says here, the Israeli police officer who shot Taka, the guy's name was Shlomo Taka, was arrested on suspicion of murder. So they've already arrested the officer, the police internal investigations department said. The Haifa Magistrates Court later released the officer to house arrest. So they haven't named the officer. We don't know what his true identity is. It may be that it was leaked who he really was. But, it's going to be very interesting what's going on. Here's a little video of some of the rioting, if it can work. Yeah, all across the world, people have a problem turning the camera to the side.
תראה איך הם מרביצים לאנשים.
ביזיון, כלום, צעקו פה, אני בהלם.
תראה, פיצצו אנשים.
אני בהלם.
So yeah, that's about it for this story. There have been a number of Ethiopians that have been shot by police in the past year or so. There are also allegations that the demonstrations or protests or riots, depending on how you look at them, are funded by the New Israel Fund. So the New Israel Fund touches on the project that I'm involved in, which isn't really focused on Israel, but it's focused on a lot of groups here in the U.S., leftist groups that are intersecting together. Some of them are climate change groups. Some of them are, illegal immigration groups and stuff like that. And it's all part of the same fundraising network. And really the issue of where funding comes from is pretty big. But the issue of who is the director is also pretty big. And over here they're accusing the NIF, the New Israel Fund, of funding this. The NIF is an organization that is affiliated with Soros, George Soros, and his Open Societies foundations. So they are generally trying to foster this discord. There's this whole meme on CNN, sowing discord or whatever. Jimmy Dore makes fun of it sometimes. You're sowing discord, a big rebuke. So yeah, it's the same idea over there. It's pretty crazy that suddenly people want to say, oh, George Soros, he's if you criticize him, he's anti-Semitic. Well, George Soros, he actually funds organizations that want to essentially take over other countries, okay? And one of the other countries is Israel. One of the other countries, and they want it to become a less Jewish country. So if people tell you, oh, you're being anti-Semitic for criticizing George Soros, you can tell them George Soros is an asshole to everybody. He's an asshole to the Jews as well, but he's an asshole to literally everybody, Hungarians. So the issue isn't people being anti-Semitic towards him. The issue is him being an asshole towards the world. And this could be a good example of it. Not quite sure yet. And now, before we get into the election, I think I'm going to have a beer, as some would say. So, thank you, honey. Ah, that hit the spot. So refreshing. You can just taste the hops. So, we had these articles were from a couple days ago, so I saved them. And CNN is claiming that Bernie Sanders is in big trouble for 2020. And I don't know why people want to forecast these things so far ahead. I wouldn't say he's in great shape. And I've said before that his problems are different this time than they were in 2016. Because, and this is important, he's not running against a one establishment candidate, which was Hillary Clinton, and a couple also rans like Lincoln Chafee. He's running against a full field of people who are just as batshit crazy as he is. And it's saying here that he's only at 14% per CNN's latest poll. That's down from 18% in our last poll. As important, Sanders is now running behind California Senator Kamala Harris and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. These are candidates who have lower name recognition than he does. So anyway, I think these polls are, it's not just a CNN poll either. Sanders doesn't look much better in Quinnipiac's latest poll, which puts him at 13%. So that's the whole issue. They're using the Quinnipiac poll. Quinnipiac is one of the most inaccurate polls that I've ever seen. I remember, I think they put Clinton ahead in Ohio in 2016, right before the election, and she lost by an insane margin. She lost by like 10 points, and I think Quinnipiac had her virtually deadlocked. I mean, I could even pull it up. So here, let me just look it up. It'll take a second. So they're just known for their very inaccurate polling. Let me see here. Bear with me. So let's look at some of the polls here. This is on my other screen, so I'll show it to you in a second. So yeah, Quinnipiac had Hillary Clinton down by 3% in his last poll, and down by 1% in the poll before that. I'll show it here. Let me drag it over here. So you can see here the two of the last polls, and the Columbus Dispatch, which is the newspaper over in Columbus, the capital, actually had her winning, which was also ridiculous. And then who won? Who won the race? I mean, you can see here that. Sorry. She lost, and she lost by like a crazy margin. I mean, over 8%, which is pretty. It's a pretty big margin in Ohio, which used to be a swing state. So yeah, the polling agencies are liars, and there's no bigger liar than Quinnipiac University, which is just ridiculous. So yeah, that's about it for this ridiculous story. Oh, Bernie's done already. I'm not going to conclude that he's done until he's really done. Okay, I'm not. I don't care about these people who are willing to cheer for him, every single misstep or setback, because this is going to be a long race. We'll see what happens, and I think Sanders is he's a danger to the country, and I'm honestly trying to figure out myself who is going to come out the winner. It's going to be very difficult. There's a number of candidates I think are for sure not going to win. People like Seth Moulton, I don't know what the hell they're doing. They're definitely wasting their time. That's for sure. Their constituents probably would agree that they're wasting their time. So yeah, they just go into they go through Suffolk, which is another horrible polling firm. So yeah, CNN hasn't learned anything. They're going to try to promote this narrative that Bernie Sanders has done, which I'm not willing to conclude yet. And then there's this story, which is from Washington Post by Eugene Robinson, who's one of their national columnists. It says, never Trump Republicans and independents may be shocked to hear this, but the Democratic Party is likely to nominate a Democrat for president. That means they're not going to nominate someone who thinks exactly like a never Trump Republican. Break out the smelling salts. I think several refugees from the GOP pontificating on Twitter and the nation's leading op-ed pages just fainted dead away. I, for one, have pretty much had it with the chorus of center-right voices braying that the Democrats are heading for certain doom and the nation for 4 more years of President Trump. If the party picks a nominee who actually embraces the party's ideals, elections are choices. These never-Trumpers will have to make one. Anyone who watched last week's 2-night candidates debate should be confident that the eventual Democratic nominee is virtually certain to support universal health care, comprehensive and compassionate immigration reform, reasonable gun control, yeah, right, measures to address climate change, and bold steps to address income inequality. No, this is not a Republican agenda. Excuse me. Outcasts from the GOP will have to decide whether to accept it in the interest of ending our long national nightmare or reject it and stick with the president who kowtows to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. But don't blame Democrats for supposedly driving moderate voters into the arms of Trump. For one thing, if never Trump Republicans were such brilliant political analysts, they'd never have lost control of their party to Trump in the first place. So that's a valid point. And aside from the other insanity in this article, I think it does throw the gauntlet down for those people who are never Trump Republicans. They are constantly harping on the fact that Trump is this hazard to the nation. He's going to destroy the republic. He's indentured us to Putin. And at the same time, we're seeing the economy is very good. Apparently, I saw that the job numbers were supposedly good today. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if one of you in the chat can tell me. I didn't really look into it, but I heard that there was bragging from the White House, which is, it's standard. But yeah, the economy is doing much better than the Democrats were predicting. There are people who haven't been able to benefit from the new economy. The real question is whether the Democrats will get those people to vote for them, and equally important, whether those people are Trump supporters who will say, well, we weren't really the people who benefited from his presidency. This time we're going to stay home or something. But from what I can tell, it just isn't working out that way. It looks like, on the average, Trump voters are satisfied, and the anti-Trump voters are simply very divided. They don't know who they want. They don't know what type of candidate they want. And people like Eugene Robinson, who are they proposing? They're basically agreeing that, well, we're just going to get behind the person who is against Trump. It doesn't matter how crazy they are. It doesn't matter whether it's Beto, whether it's Cory Bathroom Booker. They really don't care. And that's really the issue that I think they have to confront. It's that you do need someone who's a valid competitor. You can't just elect any schmuck in the country. It says, for another, polls show that the Democratic agenda has broad public support. Yes, Trump is going to yell socialism, but Democrats could nominate the ghost of Ronald Reagan, and Trump would still try his best to paint the apparition red. That's his only play, whether the nominee is Comfy Slipper, Joe Biden, Firebrand, Bernie Sanders, or any of the others in between. So the thing is that if he wants to say, oh, socialism, you're exaggerating or whatever, no, the fact of the matter is that you have people. The Democratic Party now has open socialists campaigning for its highest positions, okay? You can't just say, well, you're just scaremongering and red baiting. You have Bernie, okay? And I don't think Bernie would dispute a lot of what people are. He kind of lies about it, but he doesn't dispute the idea that he's a radical left winger. You also have people like Marianne Williamson running, and she was on the stage and she got a fair amount of time, even though apparently her mic was cut a couple times. So you have a lot of these candidates who are, you have Andrew Yang. Okay, that's kind of a radical idea. You don't have to say that it's a bad idea to agree that it's radical. So I'm sorry, but Eugene Robinson is trying to say, well, it doesn't matter who we nominate because Trump is just going to paint them as a radical. No, there is a huge difference. And you could see it on the stage when you saw people like John Delaney arguing with Bill de Blasio last week. And the Democrats who are deluding themselves to say, well, Trump is an extremist and he's cutting up all the norms. No, you're cutting up all the norms. The people who are talking about the Betsy Ross flag being a symbol of racism like the swastika, that's cutting up a norm. You can't put that on Donald Trump. And this idea that that white supremacists took control of the button, I've never seen any evidence of it. In fact, if there were some, and almost everybody in the country missed it, then basically the media gave the Betsy Ross flag to the white supremacists, just like they did with the OK symbol, and just like they've done with milk and other things. They're just the overreaction media. That's what they do. All they do is they see something happening and then they freak out because they have no control over their emotional reactions. It says here, it should surprise no one that the rhetoric in the debate was aimed at the Democratic base because, that's who decides the outcome of Democratic primaries. Nor should anyone be surprised that when the eventual nominee tacks toward the center for the general election. So he's saying, oh, it's all a game because in the end we're going to just return to a so-called, normal platform. That's really the problem, though, because the people you need in order to promote your agenda, in order to go out and knock on doors and get people to vote, are the base. Moderates are not the base. So Eugene Robinson is basically giving the strategy away. He's saying, well, we're gonna butter them up during the primaries and then betray them in the general election. That's the type of politics that led to Donald Trump getting elected. It says here, Cher takes me to LA Kings games there for my birthday. She wears a Sharks jersey, but I always wear the old black LA Chevrolet jersey from the Gretzky era. I don't remember you saying this. The Kings had this kind of weird, ugly jersey from before that, this purple jersey. But yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I like hockey jerseys. They're pretty awesome. I have like this Russian hockey jersey somewhere over there, but I'm not going to go up and get it. But yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but I just noticed that the LA Kings. Good for you. I've never really been a committed fan. I do like I did like the Sharks, but I wouldn't say we don't have hockey. We have like a minor league hockey team here, and some people are really into it, but I've never been able to get very interested in minor league hockey. Still a pretty good game, though. Still have men playing hockey, unlike Kevin Durant and signing with the Nets now with Kyrie Irving, and they're both going to be injured at one point during the season. It says here, it is true that the Democrats who won House seats in Trump-leaning districts last fall emphasized some elements of the party's program and de-emphasized others. I assume they'll do the same thing when they seek re-election in 2020. So, before we keep going, if you guys want, I can put the Skype in the chat in case anyone wants to call in and give some remarks or rebukes or whatever you want. I just feel some of you are a bit distracted, so Hold on. It's loading up, so I'll put the Skype link soon. It should be taken as a given that Trump's hardcore base will show up to vote for the president who has called himself your favorite president, me. The Democratic base had better be at least equally motivated to cast its ballots, especially in blue bastions such as Milwaukee, Detroit, and Philadelphia. Well, the fact is that if you come to a place like where I live, which is a pretty heavy urban area, literally nobody cares. It's almost as if, and this is one of the most democratic districts in this. It is like I think the second most democratic district in the state after Toledo. So virtually nobody was really, caring about what was going on with, this whole migrant crisis and the border and blah blah blah. I think this whole weekend, all I heard was people, setting off fireworks, or this whole week. Sorry, but it's just like. Can't people take a hint that the country is not really in crisis, that we're really living in I guess, one of the most normal periods in the history of the country? I mean, it's almost like unbelievable how there's a disconnect between these media people and the true state of the country. Let me just change one thing. So here, I'm going to put the Skype address. A second. So here's the Skype if you want me. Yeah, ZTS, we are live if you want to call in, or if you're just asking. So that's the Skype live. And then, in case you want to call from the phone, here's the number. So there. Anyway, back to the topic. There's people who honestly think that the country is falling apart. And I'm not just talking about people on the left. We're talking about a lot of people who simply are, there's people I would say that are quote unquote black pilled. A lot of them are supporting Andrew Yang. Some of them are also supporting Tulsi. And they're trying to say, well, Trump has betrayed the country. He's betrayed his voters. He's a Zio. He supports, he's bought in by Sheldon Adelson or whatever. But they can't point to a single issue where Trump has actually double-crossed them. The fact is this, okay? A lot of people had this notion of who Donald Trump is that was completely wrong. It was just them reading things into what they hoped he would be. Okay, it's very simple. During the race, there were things he said about immigration. There were things he said about, jobs and about the way that the country was being run under Obama, that people were trying to. The hell? Shit, muffkin shit. The hell does that even mean? So I'm trying to make sure your guys' chat is working, because it does censor some of my stuff on my end. So anyway, people bought into this image of who Donald Trump was that just simply was them reading between the lines for something that wasn't there. People who consider themselves white nationalists, people who consider themselves, black pillars or these hardcore anti-immigration people. And the fact is that he never really stated those things explicitly. They were just taking. They were the people who were taking the dog whistle stuff from the media seriously. Trump would say something, the media would report something he said as something different. Calling it dog whistles. Calling him an authoritarian. I remember during the convention there were headlines in my paper. I think probably in most of your papers. And the New York Times for sure, they were saying Trump has a dark vision for America. So that's spinning by the media. People who would be fans of that type of leadership, a racial, bigoted leadership, a type of fascist leadership, they bought into it because the media was telling them that's what would happen, and it just wasn't true. And meantime, some people in the center have moved into the Trump camp. And then you have some people who are centrist Republicans who have moved over to the center or left the party. Today, Justin Amash, who's technically a libertarian, or yesterday, he said he's quitting the party, declaring himself an independent. And the real problem is that a lot of people just are not willing to actually read what the president's policies are and assess them and just make an honest judgment based on what's actually written in a legislative proposal or in one of these executive orders, whatever it may be. They want it to be something that is something that fits into their agenda. And I'm talking about people on the left and the right. And that's kind of what we're talking about with people like Eugene Robinson, in his case on the left. It says, I hope the ancien regime Republicans, or I guess former Republicans, are serious when they talk about what a danger Trump is, both foreign and domestic, and how urgent it is to get him out of the White House. Do they think it would really be such an awful thing for more people to get health care, for migrant children to be treated like children, not taken from their families and caged in squalor, for universal background checks for gun purchases supported by something like 4/5 of the Americans to be made law, for the United States to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord and stop artificially boosting the coal industry, for some effort to be made to address levels of inequality that would make Gilded Age Titans blush? That's what the Democratic nominee is going to stand for, because that's what loyal Democratic voters stand for. The party should welcome refugee never Trumpers, but with open arms, but they can't be never Democrats too. So he's kind of right. If you think about it, just because some of these idiots like Bill Kristol and Max Boot and some of the National Review people are saying, well, the Republican Party has gone to the extreme and the tariffs and blah, blah, blah. Just because those people are agreeing that you need to get Trump out of the White House, and a lot of them are, Russia, 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 that doesn't mean they can go over to the Democratic Party and dictate to them how the Democratic Party will be run. There should be a difference between the two parties. One of the issues that led to Trump being elected was that there was too little of a difference, was the fact that, in the end, there's bipartisan crap that both of them support that aren't really representative of the views of the common public, of people. If you do polling, for example, the Iran nuclear deal wasn't really very popular, but Obama still pushed it through, and many of his supporters called it an accomplishment because they said, well, it prevents Iran from enriching nuclear weapons for another 10 years. They were able to spin it in a good way. But the fact is that, most of the Republican Party didn't agree with it, but they went along anyway, and they allowed him to approve the nuclear deal as an agreement, not as a treaty. Okay, that's a more complicated conversation regarding Bob Corker and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But this is what I'm saying, that people have to realize that it's not E.J. Dionne, it's Eugene Robinson is saying is that there should be a difference between the two parties, and just because these never Trump people are coming over the transom and saying, oh, we have to stop Trump, but we can't elect somebody too crazy. Well, in the minds of Democrats and progressives, what the never Trump Republicans are is pretty crazy. They're the pro-war people. They're the people who are in it with the defense industry, in it with big pharma, in it with polluters. So, yes, this is a good article. I'm surprised to say this. Okay, I'll put the link in the chat because I'm not doing links in the description anymore. For those of you that don't know, but the issue I'm talking about is that you can't have people who ruined one party and made it just a garden for corporations to pick vegetables from. That's what they did to the Republicans. You can't let them do that to the Democratic Party too. But the fact is that much of the Democratic Party is the same way. It's just that Eugene Robinson won't acknowledge it. Okay? So, yeah, I recommend you read that. if you haven't already. You have here, this is from Edward Isaac Dovier, and he's one of the people who smeared Bernie in 2018, calling him basically a pawn of the Russians. This had to do with the whole John Mattis episode, and that's how it's because of this reporter that I was able to discover the whole issue with John Mattis and Rachel Maddow, because he quoted John Mattis as an authoritative source on Russian infiltration of the Bernie campaign. So he's asking, is Joe Biden too old? So I'm a little surprised here, but let's see what he's writing. I haven't read this till the end, but it says here, Joe Biden is looking for that sweet spot between wise and over the hill. That can be hard to find when your voting record is lower than some of the other candidates in the race. People who know him have told me that the former vice president has decided, out of both strategy and conviction, that he should never apologize. He still sees himself as the same young buck visionary, the one who was barely old enough to be sworn into the Senate when he first won his seat in 1972, 3 years after Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. So that's an interesting way to phrase it. Everything about Biden comes back to how long he's been around. I would say the way he should have said it was in 1972, when we were still involved in the Vietnam War. Because remember, we got out of Vietnam in 1973. Everything about Biden comes back to how long he's been around. He was working on civil rights legislation for years before any of the other candidates, which is part of the reason he was, quote, compromising with segregationists. The Violence Against Women Act, the assault weapons ban, the Voting Rights Act renewals. He has been part of more legislation on pretty much every topic than his competitors. He knows more of the history and ins and outs of how it went down. Biden's press secretary, TJ Ducklow, declined to comment on questions about the candidate's age, even from the Atlantic. Biden believes that his experience gives him an important window into how Washington can work from a time when political discourse was more like the Lincoln-Douglas debates than rats scratching at each other over stale bread crusts. And he has the comfort of knowing that... So this is kind of buttering people back up. The questions aren't just about Biden's years in office. Responding in April to the women who accused him of unwelcome physical contact... Biden acknowledged that he'd come up in a different era, and he knew he'd need to change with the changing times. He snaps sometimes. He could ramble. The references can be dated, and then shortly after he launched his campaign, he mixed up Theresa May and Margaret Thatcher. When he has these gaffes, rivals and pundits ascribe added significance. He is deft with selfies, but also defends himself by pointing out things like being the deciding vote on the Gurney Amendment, which happened in 1974. And I don't know what the hell that is. Since he entered the race this spring, he spent more days off the trail than on, though notably he often meets with supporters for longer than his rivals. And on the day of that big fish fry event in South Carolina 2 Fridays ago, he was the last candidate to leave. Then there was his exchange with Senator Kamala Harris of California at last week's debate, when she went after him for his opposition to public school busing in the 1970s. Biden's surprise response prompted a number of people to use the words old and weak with me. Calling him out of touch and unapologetic is how the Harris campaign has kept going after him, even as Biden and his aides have responded by calling her grasping and opportunistic. Wow, that's not... So eventually there's going to be... They're going to trot out the whole woman thing. They're going to say, oh, he's criticizing her for being a woman. Including by pointing to comments on Wednesday in which Harris got tangled up trying to give her own position on busing. We'll get to that too. Here it is. So it says, or there's the story he told last weekend at a Seattle fundraiser of how it would have been okay to make fun of a gay waiter 5 years ago. He told the same story in 2014 as having been okay 15 years before. 5 years ago, he illustrated the story with an imitation of the waiter with a put-on lisp. This is actually not bad. Biden would be the oldest president ever if he wins the nomination and is elected. He'll turn 78 2 weeks after Election Day, beating out the current record holder, Donald Trump, who was 71 when he was inaugurated, though Bernie Sanders, who's 14 months older than Biden, would outdo both. Biden is sensitive to questions about his age. His insiders told me he'd immediately shot down speculation seeded by people close to him about potentially making a pledge to serve only one term. 2 weeks ago, I think he might outlive me, but let's see here. Only Canadians detest white Canadians these days. What the hell? Oh, even I don't know what the hell he's talking about. 2 weeks ago, when introduced at a Planned Parenthood forum in South Carolina, he stopped the moderator and said, "You've had a long career in politics," saying, "Stop emphasizing the long part, will you?" He's like Farmers Insurance, Representative Cedric Richmond of Louisiana told me in May, just before Biden's official kickoff rally in Philadelphia, appropriating the company's slogan. He knows a thing or two because he's done a thing or two. Yeah, the things he's done are basically, I mean, Joe Biden, he was in the Senate for so long, and then he was vice president. And then you wonder how the country got so screwed up. It's because of people like Joe Biden. Biden's pitch is that he connects to the new generation because millennials have been awakened politically in response to Trump in a way that mirrors how he remembers his generation being inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, as he told Reverend Al Sharpton in a recent interview. Yeah, that's the key. Like pointing to people who many young Americans probably don't even know who Bobby Kennedy was. Okay, they don't. And I'll say this. This is what's important. People know sometimes, oh, he was John F. Kennedy's brother. Well, can you name what positions he held? Do these people know that Bobby Kennedy was Attorney General, or that he was a bad Attorney General at that? He was one of the worst in terms of his he wasn't prepared for the office, for one thing, and for another, he decided to go after the mob, but he had virtually no legal experience to do it. So he was immediately, he was in conflict with J. Edgar Hoover. Bobby Kennedy was a horrible attorney general, and then he was a senator from New York. Many of those people would probably say, "Oh, I know what he was. He was JFK's brother." They can't name either of those things. So why even bring it up? The contrast can play out within a few minutes, like at the Planned Parenthood forum when a woman spoke emotionally about having 3 abortions after being assaulted by an ex-husband and while in the military, pressing Biden on how he changed his position on the Hyde Amendment. Biden's initial answer struck some in the audience as patronizing, given who would be in the crowd at a Planned Parenthood primary event. In short, he made the issue about him. First of all, a lot of you women, maybe a lot of the men out here don't realize what incredible courage it took to stand up and say that, because of the matter is that when you recall, the reason I wrote the Violence Against Women Act in the first place, and I wrote it, was because of what I've seen, what I understand happening, going into neighborhoods and communities, and it knows no color, it knows no bound, it knows no ethnicity. For you to stand and recall that brings it all back immediately. What he said after, though, went further. Biden spoke passionately about how he thought that the woman's ex-husband should be in jail. He cited statistics about transgender women being killed. He stumbled a little bit, much like he stumbled at the debate last Thursday, still trying to keep up with staff who have been pushing him to squeeze his senatorial answers into 30 seconds, but told the woman he wanted to talk with her in person backstage and learn from her about what he didn't know. Didn't Joe suggest that people fire their shotgun up in the air if someone is prowling around the house? So, yeah, that's let me see if I can find a clip of that. That is a pretty funny clip, if I may say so. Here, I have a window here. So I was listening to this song earlier. So. This is pretty funny.
Do you believe that banning certain weapons and high-capacity magazines will mean that law-abiding citizens will then become more of a target to criminals, as we will have no way to sufficiently protect ourselves.
Is
A
this
sentiment that came up
is
again
this
and
Parents
again.
Magazine?
It is.
I have Parents Magazine at home. I've never heard anybody in Parents Magazine ask these kinds of questions, but I'm delighted to answer them. First of all, the idea that, repeat the last part of the question, please.
So she's asking if a ban goes into effect on certain kinds of weapons and high-capacity magazines.
And what's her name?
Kate.
Kate, if you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun, have the shells, a 12-gauge shotgun, and I promise you, as I told my wife, we live in an area that's wooded and somewhat secluded. I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here, or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun, and fire 2 blasts outside the house. I promise you, who's ever coming in is not going to, you don't need an AR-15. It's harder to aim, it's harder to use, and in fact, you don't need 30 rounds to protect yourself. Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun.
So there's a song somebody made out of it, if I can find it. It's pretty good. I think it's here.
I have 2 shotguns in my home. They're locked in a safe. There's a metal gun case. We live in an area that's wooded, somewhat secluded. And I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony and fire 2 blasts outside the house. Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun. You don't need a machine gun. You don't need 30 rounds. Buy a shotgun. Buy a double-barrel shotgun.
No, you don't need a flamethrower, and you don't need a tank. You don't need an AR-15 to scare those thugs away. No, and I don't need a grenade launcher. I don't need an F-15. There's just one thing I need to do, and they'll stay away from me. Fire 2 blasts outside the house. Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun. Jill, buy a shotgun, baby. You don't need a machine gun. You don't need a machine gun. You don't need 30 rounds. Buy shotguns. Buy a double-barrel shotgun.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I thought that was pretty good. Honestly, I mean, I think it was like really well made. I know it's a joke, but it was, yeah, that's ridiculous. I think it's actually much easier to aim with an AR-15. Having the truth is, I don't think I've ever shot the AR-15. I have shot the SIG. I'm not like a huge gun buff at all, but he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It's just shut up, okay? This is a real complaint. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I know a couple of you guys are big gun people. If the gun control people could present one person, who knows something about weapons, there'd be a conversation, but they don't have one. What else here? So yeah, it just keeps going. It says about 6. So in a pre-debate briefing last week, a person who by the rules reporters had to agree to as a condition of attending could only be named as a quote Biden campaign official. So they're dictating to this press how they can talk to people. This is literally the media colluding with the Biden campaign. Responded to one question about age by noting that Sanders is a year older and insisting no one ever talked about that. Swatting back arguments about making room for a new generation, the campaign official said, "It is the rare Democratic campaign where there isn't a candidate calling for a new generation or someone to pick up the torch," adding, "This is a process and it's an open process for a reason." About 6 hours later, Representative Eric Swalwell of California, who was still in diapers through Biden's second term in the Senate, called for Biden to pass the torch. It's printed on his campaign merchandise by citing a speech that Biden gave in 1986 calling for the torch to be passed to the next generation. "I'm still holding on to that torch," Biden said, and a mini melee erupted on stage. South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who has been talking for more than a year about how he doesn't think Democrats can win by saying back or again, tried to get in with, "As the youngest guy on the stage, I feel like I probably ought to contribute before before being cut off by Sanders saying, as part of Joe's generation, let me respond. The moderators gave the time to Sanders, who argued that the question was about ideas, not age. Biden's team feels confident that his greatest strength in the campaign is that people know him to be a decent man. Whatever. Welcome to Desert Mav, by the way. I haven't seen you for a while, but thank you for joining again. On Wednesday, I called Rock to ask how he'd assess Biden's chances. The math says he might be the nominee, but he definitely won't be president if you believe in math, Rock told me. So he's talking about Jonathan Rock. Oh, here we go. So it says Biden's team feels, I skipped ahead. Biden's team feels confident that his greatest strength in the campaign is that people know him to be a decent man, but voters have never gone for anyone they knew anywhere near as well as they know Biden or anyone who'd been in politics as long. Jonathan Rock, a fellow at the Brookings Institution think tank and an Atlantic contributing editor, coined in 2003 what he calls the 14-year rule, which found that every president since the beginning of the 20th century had been elected president or vice president a maximum of 14 years since his first election. Biden would pass the 14-year rule 3 times over, with 5 years to spare. So, yeah, I think if you include Clinton, yeah, Clinton was within the 14-year range. On Wednesday, I called Rock to ask how he'd assess Biden's chances. The math says he might be the nominee, but he definitely won't be president if you believe in the math. Rock told me, if the public goes for someone who's been around this long, that would show a substantive change of heart or a backlash against Trump. That would be a statement on Biden's part that they don't want anyone who breaks a lot of China and knows what he's doing, he told me. There's no magic rule, just a happenstance that hits on what Rock thinks is a fundamental truth about the American public's desire for fresh faces and ideas. With Biden, he said, I don't think we've ever seen that kind of staleness before. Either he's non-violable if you believe the 14-year rule, or he completely blows the rule out of the water. Trump has called Biden sleepy and said he looks different than he used to. He acts different than he used to, and he's even slower than he used to be. So anyway, this is basically dwelling on the same point, and they're giving Biden too much credit. Yeah, he's way behind the times. He's way behind the times. And, the fact is that when he evokes people like Fritz Hollings, which he did, who was a huge segregationist at the time, and talks about how he wishes they were back. Well, Fritz Hollings was a massive segregationist. Okay, this is beyond talking about how you cooperated across the aisle and stuff like that. This is about you really liking someone who had opinions that the modern Democratic Party would consider abhorrent. So yes, it is an issue of him being behind the times. You don't have to agree. Now, I mean, I don't know if any of you in the audience are segregationists. I'm not. But I think you would all agree that the segregationist policy was not in vogue, at least not in the 21st century in the Democratic Party. And for him to keep bringing it up, and it's him, it shows that he's completely out of touch. It shows that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And it shows that he's basically full of crap. And I think that the Biden campaign is in worse shape, I think, than the Sanders campaign, because he'll keep going from place to place and still trying to use the same mojo that he's done in the past. But it's just not the same thing. And you can't teach an old dog new tricks. What are they going to do? They're going to teach him how to twerk on stage in order to appeal to new people. And then there's the issues of corruption and everything. It says everyone else so far who's made the age argument against Biden has made them very carefully. Seth Moulton, the representative from Massachusetts who launched a presidential campaign late and has been swinging hard to get in, has a line that he uses all the time about how it's time for the generation who voted for the Iraq war to move aside and be replaced by the generation who fought in the Iraq war. This isn't very subtle. Biden supported the war, and Moulton is a decorated Marine who served 4 tours, but it's an attack that Moulton is making after a few years of being a favorite of Biden, who included him in the group of young veterans in Democratic politics who reminded him of his late son, Beau. So I think that this is it's going to be a steadily deflating balloon, the Biden candidacy, and I think he's going to be over. It's not people don't realize that, how is he going to attract more voters? Okay, how are you going to get people who decided overnight not to vote for you to come back to voting for you, and people who were going to vote for these other candidates to go vote for you now? It's not as easy as people think when you're talking about somebody who's been in politics for as long as Biden has. So that's about it concerning Joe Biden. We're going to get rid of some of these tabs since we're done with them. This one we'll do at the end. Kamala Harris is now saying that she's not really for federally mandated school busing, which is, at least she's admitted that she's lying and she's not completely insane. Which, if she really did support that, it would be a ridiculous position that you would support busing, mandatory school busing for integration in the 21st century, because how would you go into, public school districts and tell people, oh, we're going to send your kids across town nowadays? It was hard enough back in the 70s. It says Senator Kamala Harris on Thursday clarified her position on federally mandated school busing, saying it's only necessary in cases where local governments are actively opposing integration. Well, where are they? Where? Name one place. Name one place. I'd really like to hear where local governments are opposing integration. Harris said that in the 1960s and 70s, institutions were literally working against integration of our schools. That's why she supported busing then, she said, but now thinks it should be just a tool available to local governments and school districts to address segregation. Today is very rare that we require the courts or the federal government to intervene, Harris told reporters Thursday before a campaign event in Indianola, Iowa. Her stance on busing came under scrutiny after last week's debate when she went after former Vice President Joe Biden for his stance on busing while he was a senator. Biden said he was in favor of voluntary busing but opposed federally mandated busing. During the 1970s and 80s, however, Biden actively worked against busing efforts and was an outspoken critic of the tactic. But Harris muddied the waters Wednesday when she told reporters she too did not support federally mandated busing and supported it only as an option for local governments. So what was wrong in 1975 is apparently right today, according to Kamala Harris. Yeah, that's another good point, Stormy. It's not exactly eco-friendly to bus everybody away. Yeah, you're increasing the carbon footprint. That's what's really going to happen. On Thursday, Biden told reporters after seeing her latest comments that he believed the two agreed on the issue and that he felt that her critique had come out of nowhere. Harris, however, told reporters, "We do not agree," pointing to his past criticism of busing, and said she was surprised Biden was caught off guard by her debate stage criticism. Part of the impetus of the conversation was the statements that the vice president made about his work with segregationists, and that was the subject of the conversation for days on end. So if he and his team weren't prepared for the topic, I don't know what to say about that. And she's right. If Biden thought that he was going to get this question just glossed over by all the other candidates and the moderators, and by the way, the moderators didn't bring it up, then Joe Biden is an idiot, and he thinks that the campaign has basically been decided. I mean, do you guys think that maybe somebody told Biden, oh, we're not really going to we're not really going to go hard on you. We're gonna throw you a few softballs and it's all gonna be over. Maybe somebody forgot to tell the other candidates that. The feud erupted as Harris enjoyed a surge in a number of post-debate polls, and both she and Biden descended on Iowa for the 4th of July holiday. Iowa is a key state for both candidates as they vie for the Democratic nomination. Now, I don't know about Biden because he can do whatever the hell he wants. He's not in office anymore. The fact that Harris and some of these other, serving candidates, the ones who are in the Senate or serving as mayor or whatever, the fact that they did not go back home for the 4th of July holiday, that shows how much they don't really respect their own constituents, okay? I think that that's an issue. phone line. Yeah, Zatoichi, I'll put the number over here. You also have Beto is falling apart completely. It says here, reeling O'Rourke seeks a way forward. The Texans boosters think organization in a moment could turn the campaign around. Things can change on a dime, says one strategist. He got battered in his first presidential debate. His poll numbers have sunk to low single digits. Glowing press coverage has given way to questions about how long he can hang on. Beto O'Rourke's candidacy today is almost an inversion of what it was at the start of his campaign less than 4 months ago. Back then, he bathed in national attention and raised a staggering $6.1 million on the first day of his campaign, while drawing criticism for his light policy footprint and lack of campaign infrastructure. Today, even as he's assembled a stable of experienced operatives and released a spate of policy proposals, the former Texas congressman is polling at 2% nationally in the latest Morning Consult survey. Let's see here. Have you tried ZCS? Let me see here. A fundraising machine in his Senate campaign last year, O'Rourke has dodged questions about his latest performance in the money race. So he's running out of money. He actually raised more money in his Senate race than any candidate in any non-presidential race in history. Okay, isn't that crazy? Yet O'Rourke returned to Iowa this week in seemingly high spirits, campaigning alongside his wife and young children as they toured the state in an RV. The candidate has been expanding his organization at his Texas headquarters and in early primary states, and his advisors and supporters insisted they aren't worried. The race is nothing if not fluid, they said, and O'Rourke has the political talent to catch fire. O'Rourke is now working with the political media consultancy Win, and its Bill hires a top Democratic strategist who specializes in running progressive campaigns, and O'Rourke aide confirmed to Politico. He has hired several other well-respected operatives in recent weeks. He has nearly 50 staffers in Iowa, and after spending 2 nights at home in El Paso in June, he is beginning July with 2 full weeks on the road. Gerke says that's because everyone, including me, detests Ted Cruz. Well, look, I mean, he lost to Ted Cruz, so what do you want? Apparently, some people like Ted Cruz. It's a long haul, and we're in the 3rd inning, and maybe Beto's down 3-1, said Kurt Meyer, an influential Iowa Democrat who hosted O'Rourke at his home in St. Ansgar for a house party this week. But Beto has a fresh voice, and he's whip smart, and he learns. Let's see here. One of you is trying to call in, but I mean, I don't hear anything on my end. There's certainly no calls coming in. So, sorry. You know. Oh, okay. I was addressing how Beto raised his cash pile. O'Rourke's reception in Iowa, the first in the nation caucus state, marked a reprieve from a difficult stretch in the campaign. On Thursday, O'Rourke walked in a 4th of July parade in the small town of Independence in Iowa's Buchanan County, starting 2 car lengths behind fellow candidate Joe Biden, but falling blocks back as he lingered to speak with spectators and pass out candy. He carried his 8-year-old son, Henry, on his shoulders and thanked even his critics for talking with me. I feel really good, O'Rourke told reporters when asked about the state of his campaign. It was only a week ago that O'Rourke, in his first presidential debate, was pummeled by fellow Texan Julian Castro over his opposition to decriminalizing border crossings. O'Rourke, who has centered much of his campaign on improving the treatment of immigrants, does not agree with Castro on the issue of decriminalization. And O'Rourke and his advisors publicly maintained he debated well. Privately, however, some cringed. He looked like someone drowned a puppy in front of him, said a Democratic strategist who has been helping O'Rourke in early primary states and who still supports him. However, the strategist added, nothing matters, things can change on a dime. So they're going to keep going on with this. I would say Beto is done after the next debate because, the truth is that Beto O'Rourke, when he was campaigning in Texas, had a captive audience because he was campaigning against someone that the Democrats hated anyway. This time he's going to be getting compared. It's the same issue with Bernie Sanders. He was getting compared to Hillary Clinton that a lot of progressives hated anyway. So, of course, he was going to get a good showing. Now Bernie Sanders is facing a number of other people who are saying also a lot of crazy things, and therefore it doesn't really make as much of an impact. With Beto, the issue is that he gained a lot of sympathy from people like Jimmy Kimmel and the woke crowd because he was going up against Ted Cruz, which like Larry is saying is just the chimer of the left. And now he's going up against people who are significantly more sympathetic to the Democratic audience. So he's completely toast. I don't see any hope of him coming back. I could be wrong, but I don't understand how anyone would say that he's going to be a good candidate. He also looked pretty timid in the debate. If I'm, just like the other person in this article said, he looked like someone drowned a puppy in front of him. So, yeah, we're going to go on to Peter Beinart saying conservatives conjure up liberal support for Antifa violence. Despite trawling social media, conservative publications found scant evidence that mainstream commentators approved of an attack on a journalist. Well, we're not talking about just mainstream. And who defines the mainstream? Peter Beinart. Okay, who I didn't know, he's a professor of journalism at CUNY, which is ridiculous that they would have somebody like him being a professor of journalism since he's an opinion writer. That's what he is. He's not a journalist. He's an opinion writer. He's not reporting. He's not going to the field. He's not embedded anywhere. He's not, a beat reporter. He's an opinion writer. Okay? He's an opinion writer. On June 29th, the video appeared showing masked activists wearing black clothing, the garb commonly associated with, quote, Antifa, the self-described anti-fascist movement, assaulting the conservative journalist Andy Ngo in Portland, Oregon. As if in unison, conservative publications published articles accusing, quote, the, quote, left, liberal journalists and reporters of condoning the attack. That's a disturbing charge. Luckily, there's little evidence it's true. Well, the evidence is that they didn't really go and make a big deal out of it until prompted. That's one part of the evidence. Because I can guarantee you that if it was someone who was, like Jim Acosta, they would have been all over it. They were all over Jim Acosta for just being expelled from the White House press corps for a weekend. So, yeah, he's full of crap here. In his first sentence, the article accused media pundits of having, quote, dismissed reports of a conservative journalist's attack. To substantiate that charge, the Daily Caller cited tweets by Alheli Picasso, Nathan Bernard, Vegas Tenold, and Charlie Warzel. Picasso's, according to, I think one of the issues is, so can you guys even see the number that I'm putting out there, or is it? Because I can see it. I mean, I don't hear anybody trying to call. You're ringing but not answering. I don't hear anything. I'll be honest with you. Let me see if I have to do something here. mean, it says it's active. I don't know if you guys want to try. Are you guys using Skype or are you just calling from the phone? Yeah, I know Larry is trying. He's saying he's trying. All right. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you because I don't hear anything. I don't, nothing is going on here. I mean, maybe if you let's see here. Calling from my phone. How do I video with this? What are you talking about? Anyway, yeah, maybe you should try using the Skype name if you have a Skype account, Larry. So the Skype name, I'll put it in the chat again. That could be the key. So yeah, I don't know why it's not ringing. I don't hear. I literally can't hear anything. So Larry, maybe send me an email with your number, and I'll try to call you back. Okay. So I mean that's the best I can do. I'll keep an eye out for it. To substantiate that charge, the Daily Caller cited tweets by Alheli Picasso, Nathan Bernard, Vegas Tenold, and Charlie Warzel. Who are they? Picasso, according to her Twitter page, is an athlete, writer, researcher, Politico from Calgary, Canada, and has slightly more than 10,000 followers. So let's look at Alheli Picasso. So she is verified by Twitter, so isn't that an issue? So I would wager that she's visible in Maclean's, which is a major journalistic. Oh, here we go. So he's kind of lying about what's going on here because she happens to be a writer for one of the most prestigious magazines in Canada. Okay? And she has one article about Justin Trudeau's groping scandal. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 articles in Maclean's magazine, which is the most prestigious magazine in Canada. So I'm sorry, but Peter, you do realize that certain journalists are not exactly. I called it just rang. Let me see here. Yeah, this is screwed up. How's about Google? You can call me on Google Hangouts, Larry. You can just use my email. Okay, I'll put the email. Here's an idea. Okay, so we'll use my channel email, and you can call on Google Hangouts. That might be a better idea. Yeah, I don't know what the hell is wrong with Skype. I imagine that other people have issues like this too, because honestly, I haven't heard literally anything from Skype. There's no notifications. There's literally nothing. It's ridiculous. I don't know how people are. I mean, a second. So yeah, put that email into your Hangouts, and you should be able to ring me, and I should be able to hear you too. Let's see here. Okay. I got a missed call from one of you guys, so I'll call you back. So yeah, I'm inviting you to Skype. Here we go. Hello? Hello? I picked up. Now it's working. Yeah, you guys call one at a time. Let me see here. Yeah, it's like dropping in and out. That's the problem here. And the problem is I can't call back because I don't have credit. Okay, I've added you as a contact. Maybe, yeah, try again. Whoops. This is crazy. The last time somebody tried to do it, it worked fine. So far as I know. I don't know how somebody didn't. Yeah. So 408, number 408, just try again. You know, sorry about that, but it's Skype, it's not me. Oh, crap. So yeah, I need to send back a Skype message. Costs like, let me see here, 971. So Desert Mav, I'm going to try to call you with Hangouts. Okay, so just be aware, not with Skype, with Hangouts. If you have Hangouts, that'll probably be better. So I just sent you a message on Hangouts, so you can call me back if you want, but I think this Skype thing is not going to work because whoever's 408, it just hasn't been working. Is this put the link in the chat? Answer, damn it. Yeah, Larry, I tried. I mean, what do you want? Sorry. I didn't, you know, I never realized how awful Skype is. It's like, you know, you try to, honestly, I try to call people on Skype too, and it's pretty patchy, but it's one of the better options. Let me see if, yeah, Desert Mav, check your Google Hangouts. Okay, check that. That might be the way to do it. So, sorry, that's the best I can give you. Okay, so who else did they say? Picasso, according to her Twitter page, is an athlete, writer, researcher, and politico from Calgary. The Daily Caller quoted a tweet in which he declared Annie Ngo as someone who antagonizes those he knows will react in a disproportionate way. Those who assaulted him, however, are the ones at fault here. For his part, Nathan Bernard runs Bernard Media, which, according to Rolling Stone, is a one-man operation. He has 24,000 Twitter followers. You want me to call you? Yeah, I'll call Larry. 1 second. So, Let's see if Larry can pick up now.
Hey man, are you there?
Yeah, Larry, I can hear you, but I think I can hear your phone too.
Far out. I don't see you on TV though.
Well, that's because if my camera's on, yeah, silence. Can you silence the other phone?
What phone?
That's
Hey man, are you
the,
there?
Yeah, Larry, I can hear you, but I think I can hear your phone too. Yeah, I can hear me. Yeah, yeah. Turn down the volume in the on the computer. Yeah, silence. Can you silence the other phone?
What phone? I know, right?
Yeah, Larry, I can hear you, but
Yeah, this tech stuff. You know, I used to run nuclear reactors in the Navy, but I can't run this goddamn phone.
turn down the volume in the on the computer. Tell Sharon to turn down the volume on the. Hold on. I'm also getting so DMAV is so DMAV. Sorry, you're gonna have to wait till after. So Larry's on the line right now. So yeah, we'll just do this with Hangouts once Larry logs off. So I'm not going to show any of you on screen. By the way, I can see you, Larry, but as long as I have the video on the OBS, so the camera's using it on OBS and you can't see me on the Hangouts. So anyway, so Larry's here. He's been
Here's
and
Cheryl
so
and
yeah, there's Cher and do you want me to show the cat?
Sure.
So this is Fred the cat. So they've been watching the show for what is it, like a year and a half or so? I mean, you've been watching the show for a while. So what you want to talk about today?
We just wanted to say hi. Happy 4th, everybody.
Happy 4th.
Here's
Happy
my lovely
Independence Day.
wife, Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl. Sorry for all the school jokes.
We just wanted to say hi. Happy 4th, everybody.
Hold on. I keep getting calls. Desert Mav, if you're listening, wait till
a hell of
after
a lag here.
Yeah, you got to silence it though.
Here's my patriotic AR.
That's a 40. That's an AK, man.
Yeah, that's my AK, my patriotic AK.
So yeah, he's.
I'll go ahead and get out of the way. It doesn't seem like we're doing very good here.
Yeah, man, you got to turn the volume off if you're calling. All right.
Yep.
Thanks for calling, Larry. It's good to see you guys finally. Meet you guys technically. So yeah,
I'll go ahead and get out of the way.
All right. Bye. All right, Desert Mav, you can call here. I'll call back Desert Mav. You should be able to hear me now.
There we go.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, I think this is my second time ever trying the Google Hangouts. I had to find the app. But,
yeah. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, you know, I lived in pretty much my whole life in Portland up until 2017, and you know, I was kind of struck by that whole thing with Andy No the other day. I mean, first of all, you're talking about easily one of the whitest cities, like whitest middle class cities in America, and you know, by the left's metric, I mean, they absolutely committed a hate crime against Andy No. And I'll tell you why. Because they committed that crime, a hate crime, because he's gay and Asian and conservative. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I don't know, I think I saw Tim Pool had a video about maybe one of them getting arrested. I don't know if I haven't watched a video yet. But yeah, Portland's a joke. I don't miss it.
So you moved out of Portland, and would you say that I actually have a coworker from my last job who was from there, and he said that, you know, it's a great city to live in, but would you say like the standard of living's gone down too?
Yeah, well, I think it's, you know, when you're talking about like the downtown area, it's kind of doing its best LA San Francisco impression, you know, with regards to the homeless, you know, drug issue. But it was always a really nice place to live. It was always liberal and green and kind of hippy dippy. You know, but more lately with how unhinged the far left has gone. In particular, though, frankly, the white far left is gone. It's just become so. It's just become so unhinged. I mean, and there are some folks, a lot of regular folks, and even a few conservative folks, but it's definitely a haven for the far left. It always has been, but it's really gotten bad of late.
So my impression. So people keep calling Andy Ngo a conservative gay journalist, but I've followed some of his stuff for a while, and I wouldn't. I personally would not call him a conservative, but he is very critical of Islam, and I'd say increasingly the left. I would probably characterize him as one of these old school liberals, but the fact is that because of the way the spectrum and the Overton and window have changed, he's been lumped in with the conservatives.
Yeah. He's definitely not, what a regular conservative. I mean, he's definitely more like a classical liberal. You got guys like Sargon of Akkad and Tim Pool that classify themselves as that too. But you're right. They've definitely lumped in, what used to be just, regular liberals in with conservatives or the, alt right, far right, whatever. But but yeah, Portland it's just a far left toilet anymore. I don't miss it. I moved to Arizona, open carry state of Arizona. I'll take it all day long.
Yeah,
And,
that's what I keep hearing. I hear people who lived in states like New York move to Florida. People who lived in Maryland move here. It's like it's crazy how there's this secret migration that's not really covered by the media. Or I see some coverage of it, but it's really low key.
Right. Well, and like here, like yesterday, yesterday evening, we went and watched the fireworks at a local area here and stuff, and everybody had their American flags out and, kind of, regular patriotic type stuff, and that's not something you would see much of in a place like Portland anymore, or New York or Maryland, I'd imagine, or California, parts of. But anyway, well, I enjoy your show, man. I'm glad we're able to connect.
Yeah, man. Anytime. I hope the show I'm not doing as often as I used to because I focus more on the writing. But
Sure.
it's great. It's great still having some of the same people. Larry was just on before you, who
cool.
I've actually. I mean, we were both viewers of the same show for so long, and he's
cool.
continued to watch. So I do this so that I can try to throw out the stories I think are important, and then hear from you guys what you think. Is going on. So yeah, is this like a huge item of news over there? You're not in Portland, but maybe you still hear from people back home. Is it like a big deal over there?
Yeah, somewhat, but it's more from what I've seen. Like, I mean, I'm like a lot of us, I mean, I'm getting a lot of my news from, independent journalists, a lot of YouTuber. Well, now it's like migrating over to BitChute slowly, with the ever encroaching censorship. But yeah, I mean, it's mainstream media is just worthless anymore anyway. But so yeah, it's mostly like, the likes of Tim Pool and some of those YouTubers, or maybe something like the Daily Caller, some of those sort of resources is kind of where I have been hearing about it. But
so yeah, we're seeing thanks for Desert Mav for calling in, giving us the lowdown on the situation in Portland, at least from a former resident. I see in the chat that Larry is saying that what's going on over there is so bad that he's not going to visit his daughter and grandchildren this summer, or allow his wife to go. So yeah, the line is clear if somebody wants to hop on. Please, everyone, just try one at a time because multiple people can drop in on Hangouts and it's hard to kind of, make sense of it. Somebody is trying. So we have memes of destruction. So he's calling in. How's it going? Whoops. Let me call him back. Can you hear me?
Yo, what's going on, man?
Yo, long time no see.
I know. What's happening, brother?
So,
Oh my God.
So yeah, it's been since what was it, Sunday?
I know. It's been a very long 5 days, man.
So anyway, are you here to talk about Portland too, or is because I noticed it resonated among a lot of people, and a lot of the other stories I presented today are underreported, but this was underreported for a while too. So do you see the same issue? I know you talked a little bit about it over in Massachusetts.
Yeah, one of my concerns though is with the situation is there is a lot of fake news out there. We got to face that, and depending on especially where you get your news, because let's take for instance, it comes out. Andy gets attacked. We see him getting attacked. I mean, we have it on video and everything. Again, we don't see what necessarily preceded that. I had heard speculation again from Bronx Blogger. So I mean, again, you have to I try to weight my sources and everything. But he said that there were rumors that Andy may have been photographing like potential roster lists, and so basically he was alluding to potentially doxing people. Again, we don't have the video. I haven't heard anything else corroborating that, but. As far as potential information that gets out there into the public before it's actually vetted, it's basically the whole cement, Quikrete in milkshake thing. That was a big thing. I did hear about that for a couple of days. It's starting to appear now that at least in Andy's case, because I don't think he specifically claimed, he said that there were reports, but apparently there was no additional chemical agent. It was essentially a vegan milkshake from essentially what I heard. He still got the crap beat out of him, man. I mean, you take a look, he had a concussion or some form of head trauma. I mean, again, that's what's being reported. And the dude just got the crap beat out of him. And that's just wrong. One of the issues that I do see potentially coming is if all of a sudden Antifa folks basically kind of get thrown under the bus, which, again, we need to denounce violence, especially any initiated violence. You have the right to defend yourself. My issue is I'm starting to hear all these pushing for unmasking laws. So I did take a look into that a little bit. And this really does kind of sound like a First Amendment issue. And again, like I actually did a video yesterday on it, just kind of taking a look at some of the cases, because this really isn't a clearly defined thing from what I can see, because there have been a number of rulings going both ways, basically legitimizing the laws, repealing the laws. I believe there's currently 15 states. I believe there were up to 18 at one point that did have unmasking laws, because essentially it's kind of crazy, but it started out basically, I think, with some I'm not sure if they were union, but they were workers on, I think, one of the New York's big projects, and they were basically starting to kind of like destroy things. And then it really perpetuated with the rise of like the KKK, especially in the 20th century. You had a lot of laws instituted to help kind of prevent people from getting hurt, from getting murdered, from getting lynched and stuff like that. So those laws were put into place, and this essentially ironic thing is you go forward about 40, 50 years, and the same organization, the Klan, essentially is using the First Amendment to protect them, because they were no longer, at least as far as I know, actively committing acts of violence, but they still wanted to protest peacefully. At least that was the argument made, and they actually had won several cases. So and this is just one of those conundrums that kind of puts your mind in a pretzel, and that's why I kind of wanted to do it, because I did an op-ed basically asking, are Antifa's First Amendment rights being infringed? Because I'm hearing this argument. And because Tim Pool had brought that up, and I really started to think about it, and the arguments that I'm hearing, basically the fact that they want to wear masks because their ideas are highly unpopular, and basically, dude, this is like straight from like what was being used for the Klan, saying that they didn't want to essentially be doxxed, potentially lose their jobs and stuff. And this is a concern that I've heard a lot of folks on the more of the libertarian side of things, a lot of folks on the right, as well as a number of folks on the left have said this. And if I'm going to basically say I'm a proponent of free speech, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask that question, because it seems all too often, and one of the biggest things that I've heard from folks, whether it's on the right or left, it's, well, you always promote certain principles when it's convenient for you, yet when the shoe's on the other foot, where are you to basically hold to that principle? And I hear the criticism going both ways. So that's why I'm like, dude, I got issues with Antifa as far as criticism and stuff like that, because you don't go around perpetuating violence. But I also have heard several individuals that have heard cogent conversations with people as well. So it does kind of go both ways.
All right, so I'll respond to kind of your points, and it's pretty simple in my mind. The reason that Antifa are wearing masks, it has nothing to do with their ideas being extreme or anything. Just yesterday, so you had the RevCom USA people in full, they didn't wear any masks. They paraded through Washington with a flag, burnt the flag, and 3 of them got arrested, not for burning the flag, but for throwing the flag at a Secret Service officer. So up until then, everything was fine. Obviously, there were people cheering and everything. And yes, you could get assaulted by other citizens for things that you say that could they could find objectionable. But the Antifa people, the reason that they wear the masks is because they are inciting violence, they are committing acts of violence, and they're committing crimes, and they're trying to evade police investigation. So I don't look, this is to put their political views aside. They are not doing it for free speech reasons. If you go to a mainstream university here, look at Oberlin College, which is close to where I live, the same ideas that Antifa is proposing are fully acceptable there. There's no you'll not be disciplined by the school. You'll be able to either teach them in class if you're a professor, or use them in a project if you're a student. There's virtually no, train stop, final stop for the left in terms of academia or the media or anything. There was an op-ed last year in the Washington Post by Elizabeth Brunig that openly said we should consider adopting socialism. Okay, and that's fine, even though it was a stupid article. But the fact of the matter is that far left ideas are accepted in the country as things that you can propose and talk about. The only thing that they're getting in response is a lot of ridicule and often people who say unkind remarks to them. But they're not generally. You're not going to be assaulted if you are a far left activist. Once in a while, I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. I'm sure that I'm overlooking maybe a couple incidents, and I'm not studying this, but the idea that we're talking about, the far left, they need to protect themselves. They're in such big numbers over there in Portland that why would they be afraid? And the police openly say, well, we're not really going to intervene in any of these disputes. So no, I think that these mask laws, I don't think that's an issue of free speech in this case. I think that if you were talking about people who, they're going to do like a parade or something, like Carnival over and they're going to use it in a celebration, and the police say, hey, this is a public gathering with masks. Yeah, that would be a First Amendment grounds, because they're not inciting violence, or they haven't been known to commit any acts of violence against people. But this is a group that incites violence, commits acts of violence, and their own ideology legitimizes political violence.
My big thing is that's what I hear them essentially say about a lot of folks, that maybe we might be, or at least the folks around us may be more inclined to, basically, I hear that being said about the other side. That's essentially the same argument that I hear, because again, I tend to consume a lot of libertarian content. I hear a number of different conservative folks, as well as I try to balance it out with a number of different liberal and progressive folks as well. The thing you run into is because there were exceptions made, such as like Halloween, masquerade balls and stuff, but then it also raises the argument of basically, are people being excluded? Is this an issue of the exclusionary cause? And actually, to just take a step back to what you were saying a little bit before they're bold, you said these other individuals that threw that burning flag onto the Secret Service agent, they weren't even wearing masks, right?
Yeah, they were not.
So, but if folks were wearing masks to get away with violence, isn't that just a counterexample in and of itself? Or
No. The issue is that you're saying that they are making the case that they need the masks because they would be persecuted on the basis of their political beliefs. But nobody's persecuting leftist political beliefs in the country. In fact, I mean, that's part of the project that I'm doing right now about how acceptable far left political beliefs are, even in establishment philanthropy and academic circles. And you know what? If the First Amendment protects that, the First Amendment protects that. I don't really like it. I don't like it that you have people who are very powerful and have great reserves of money are promoting ideas that are against liberties and personal choice and things like that. But I don't have a constitutional legal argument against it. The only thing that I can do about it is to, create, basically, first of all, investigate it, research it, and bring it to the public and show the contradictions in it. And that's the approach I take. I'm not one of the people, I've thought about it, why don't I become like the local based stickman or something? But the base stickman guy hasn't really made any converts. There's nobody's going to really come over to your side because you beat somebody's ass. Okay, you're just going to attract people who already agree with you, and that's not really something that's not my approach. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So the idea that they need to wear masks because their ideas are unacceptable to the general public and they'd be harassed because of it is again, it's their persecution complex. There's people on the right with persecution complex too, but that doesn't make it so. It doesn't make it,
doesn't make it right.
Well, it doesn't make it a legal argument against the mask law if you're also committing crimes and inciting and motivated to commit acts of violence.
Yeah, I would say it's probably not. It's definitely not the optimal way to go in probably many of these scenarios. It's interesting because actually one of the events I went to, Mr. Stickman was supposed to get there, but apparently I think he may have had some proceedings he may or may not have had to attend to, or other events. I don't know. I definitely appreciate the fact that you can acknowledge that it's like, all right, I may not like what these other people are saying. However, if I'm going to support freedom of speech, I have to basically at least acknowledge they have the right to say that. But then you have the ability to use your free speech to disagree, to investigate, and basically actually see what's going on. My major issue is anytime we're going to hold all of any group or community accountable for the actions of some, I'm wary. Because then you would kind of end up having instances where I believe what happened to the Proud Boys, because essentially what I've heard about Antifa, and again, you probably be more knowledgeable about this than myself, is they're set up into individual groups like chapters, if you would. Yes, the New Jersey branch of Antifa, according to the New Jersey Department of Homeland Security, is listed among the domestic terrorist organizations on their list. I often hear that then being said, that all of Antifa are terrorists or considered terrorists. So that basically umbrella goes out. The reason why I bring up this point is because when I did go to that Patriots Day rally last year, this was after Charlottesville, and I had some questions. So I asked one of the Proud Boys, I'm like, so what's going on with that whole Charlottesville thing? The response I got, man, was, that's a different chapter. So you kind of see how, like, if in my mind, I'm like, okay, if these are basically, it's an umbrella organization where you have a bunch of individual and groups under almost like a franchise. Should we hold all of that group accountable for the actions of some. Because when I hear essentially the same things, it's like, all right, we got to be fair. And that's why it's like, all right, it might not be a popular take, but if we're going to stand by principle, we have to stand by principle. I'm not saying if I'm right or wrong. All I'm saying is I didn't see anybody bringing up this point, and that's why I made the video about it. So
yeah, this idea that it's a local, local chapters are you can distinguish between them with Antifa. It's a defense, but it's not a very sophisticated defense. And also you're saying, well, we're lumping all the Antifa people together. Well, this is the issue here. They are people who they say, well, if you wear any sort of insignia, if you make the okay hand signal, if you do things, if you, at one point they were saying if you drink milk, they were saying, if you're carrying the American flag, 2 people, I think it was 3 Marines were assaulted in Philadelphia. So
two or three Marines were, yeah.
Yeah. So these are people, well, they don't extend that courtesy to the rest of society. So it's plain that their argument in this case is completely disingenuous. They're stating, well, not all of us act like that. And you could come back and say, look, I'm not, Andy Ngo, he's not part of Patriot Prayer or Proud Boys, which, by the way, Proud Boys apparently was disbanded a few months back. But they're showing, for example, this is, you can't see it because you're on Hangouts, but Andy was in a crowd of people filming, and you can actually see splatter on his shirt, probably from one of the milkshakes. And they're saying, well, he's standing next to a local neo-Nazi. This was tweeted out by Hassan Piker, and it's like you're not seeing him do anything, okay? And the people around him are unmasked. The only thing you're seeing him do is film. Now, yes, there are people who are probably on the enemy side who don't mind him filming around them, but you're not.
Isn't that the issue right there? We consider people enemies and not our fellow Americans.
Well, they don't want there to be a neutral side. That's the issue. That's what Tim Pool is saying, and I think Tim Pool is being mild sometimes when I mean, I wouldn't say that he's justifying Antifa's actions, but I would say that at this point, I would say that Antifa is basically a criminal street gang. It's not, and this is really more like Sticks, Hex, and Hammer's approach to it. They commit acts of violence, they steal people's things, they vandalize people's property. They are a street gang, and people who say, well, not all of us do it. Well, people in street gangs, not all of them are taking their Tech Nines and painting people's painting people in drive-bys or whatever. There's plenty of support structure. There's the baby mamas. There's the all of the other people who are peripheral to the gang, but are maybe they're not doing everything that the gang is doing. They're not necessarily out there selling crack or whatever. I think most of these gangs aren't selling crack anymore anyway. But I'm using you understand the metaphor. But people who are involved in the circle, who are distributing literature, who are communicating, who are organizing. And then they say, well, we didn't really commit any acts of violence. Well, you organized the commission of acts of violence. So, yeah, I would say that Antifa is pretty much they're a criminal organization. And they believe in anarchy. They don't believe in the rule of law. So, look, they can claim First Amendment all they want. But until they actually renounce and enforce among their members, codes of decorum, including not assaulting people and, in this case, severely injuring a person. No, I don't think that the First Amendment gives them the right to wear a mask while they're committing criminal acts. That's the whole issue. They're committing criminal acts while being masked, and the mask is in order to prevent them from being prosecuted and identified. Right, or vice versa, identified and prosecuted.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. But let me ask you this, Bold. These individuals, and especially probably like you were saying, because this isn't actually something I discussed with another individual yesterday, do you think that the leadership in a lot of these Antifa groups are extremely hardened battle commanders?
Well, the problem is that they claim that they don't have a leadership because they're anarchists.
You basically smash the hierarchy and stuff like that. And again, I don't think we really have the ability to do that. I believe you can flatten a lot of hierarchies. I think one of the big things is a lot of transparency. Because the general, what I at least hear from basically a lot of the content that a lot of folks and your viewers probably consume, like the Tim Pools and stuff, I basically, I'm hearing a picture being painted of a bunch of folks that are LARPing, or like they've never really been in a fight or something before, so they don't really have a lot of experience. So I remember Vernaculus at one point. I'm not sure if it was Antifa or if it was just maybe like a Marxist meeting or something like that, but there were folks there, and he said, he's like, these folks really seem scared and stuff. So if all of a sudden you're going on a group and you actually in your mind you believe these are neo-Nazis, they must be stopped, we need to do something. If you're in a high fight or flight situation, very often if somebody does something, things usually go down very fast. I'm basing this off of like my time going to a lot of concerts and stuff, because when I was younger I liked to go like Rob Zombie, Disturbed, Marilyn Manson, stuff like that, and basically like mosh and stuff, and just get out like some frustration and stuff. But there was always a code to the pit that I found, in that, yeah, you could go around, you could push somebody, you knock somebody over, but the thing is, as soon as somebody got knocked to the ground, you would see everyone around them just helping them back up, because the goal wasn't to like end or trample somebody. The goal was to get out your frustrations, and you're roughing up people a little bit. But the one thing that was not tolerated, as soon as folks started throwing fists, and often it would seem that some of these people would, as our parents would say, were on something. As soon as they started doing that, the pit essentially, we'll put it, they took care of them. They got restrained. They got tossed to event staff. So it was something that was known, but even if it was unspoken. So it sounds like if you have a lot of folks in a lot more, let's say, highly trained groups, maybe they're very familiar with firearms, maybe they have official training, discipline, maybe they have a military background, you're going to know how to handle a high tense situation a lot better than somebody that's never experienced that. So it's just because I have heard things like this. But again, are there folks looking to stir the pot and actually start trouble? Absolutely. That absolutely does happen. There are always bad apples. It's just, I just see continuing escalation, because I'm not sure if you've seen it that much, but Antifa or Black Bloc has seen a major rise. But dude, I've started to see the rise of Blue Bloc as well, which is essentially the more conservative side, because we had a Resist Marxism rally in Boston last year, and I saw Blue Bloc there. And that's the thing. I just keep on seeing whatever side it is, somebody does something and the other side ends up adopting, and I just see a continued escalation. I'm trying to avoid the point where I think we all kind of just view this going. I just don't want to see Americans hurt and hating. And
the escalation has happened, and that's why I was highlighting this article by Peter Beinart. So I'll continue here. He was trying to justify this whole media reaction by saying, oh, the people that are being cited by the Daily Caller aren't really media people. But Hassan Piker is I mean, he's an idiot, but he has a pretty big audience. Let's not deny that. And he's saying, oh, he's with neo-Nazis, and he even said, there's a tweet from him, I think it was yesterday. It says, wonder if the brain hemorrhage caused him to tweet then delete this. So people like this, they're not really looking at the substance of what's going on. You have people who are major, Piker has 160,000 followers. So I don't know why the Daily Caller didn't cite him as opposed to, well, given that the tweet was only tweeted recently, but they tweeted people like Al-Heli Picasso, and Peter Beinart is saying, well, she's not really part of the liberal media. Well, I just showed in Canada, there is no more prestigious magazine than Maclean's in terms of establishment media. And she has 8 articles in there. So, she may not be a staff writer. She may not be somebody who's, she has a window office over there. But these are people who are involved and are, influencers within establishment media, in this case, in Canada. And people are cherry picking this and saying, well, the fact is that the only people that they're citing are people who are not really that significant in the media. The real issue is, first of all, that it took a while for people to pay attention to this issue. And this isn't the first time that Andy Ngo was assaulted. This isn't the only time that that bystanders were assaulted in Portland. And nobody's even talking about the 2 other people that were viciously assaulted, one of whom was, I think in his 60s.
The older gentleman, yeah.
So Peter Beinart can explain away, the press didn't really justify this. Well, they are, by their silence, they are justifying the assault of an elderly person. Okay, this isn't something that would have, and these are people who highlighted the Jussie Smollett case. I'm not the only person who's brought this up. So I'm sorry to the people who are saying, well, let's give the benefit to the doubt to the media. They're not really justifying this. These are people who constantly say, well, we're standing up for the rights of journalists who are being muzzled by the Trump administration. We're standing up for the free media and whatever. But they're at the same time, they're calling for the censorship of free media, which, by the way, includes people like Andy Ngo, he's not affiliated with any publication.
Well, he writes for Quillette, I think.
But Quillette is one of the organizations that they're calling for censorship of. They call them the intellectual dark web. So he gets assaulted. When he writes stuff, they say he's part of the intellectual dark web. And Quillette is not a conservative publication. If you read Quillette, it's basically a bastion of moderate liberalism.
It's typically classical liberal from what I've seen.
Yeah, classical. But some people are even, I think Brett Weinstein, for example, I wouldn't call him a classical liberal. He's even a progressive.
Oh, it's progressive, yeah.
So I'm sorry for the people who are saying, well, the liberal media didn't do nothing. Well, that's the whole issue. The issue is that you constantly talk about how you get attacked. Then you put on these, Chanel dresses and go over to the White House Correspondents' Dinner and pontificate about how you're under attack. I mean, these people have to get over themselves. Okay, there's a real issue with information. I struggled for over a year to get a major story that I thought was important, that my witnesses thought was important out there to media, and that includes conservative and progressive media. And nobody wanted to tackle it because they didn't think it was really newsworthy. And that's an issue that I think many journalists would probably say they could, or I guess you could call them citizen journalists. They would say they have a common experience with it, and it's a problem. Those of us that want to help expose things that are going out, that are going down in this country, that are tearing the fabric apart, which is exactly what you say is what you fear. Well, we're not getting any attention because they don't think it's newsworthy.
The thing that really bothers me is I think that was CNN's greatest missed opportunity. Because maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but I'm pretty sure somebody out there remembers. At some point, probably, I don't know, was it 3-4 years ago or so, CNN was making a big push for its citizen journalists. Basically, if you see something, if you have a video of something, because this is when basically mobile technology, you could really start to stream somewhat decent video and stuff about a situation. You could send your video in, and they were making a big push for that. I haven't seen that in I don't even know how long, man, because that truly is the way of the future. You could have a major organization that has the infrastructure, whether it's a website, whether it has a franchise on TV, a cable network, whatever it is, in order to scale with basically the meta that we have, especially with coming 5G technology. I mean, might have my own issues with 5G technology. That's another story in and of itself. But the sheer fact that we now have the technology, we now have the ability to communicate from halfway over the world in just milliseconds. That's freaking crazy, man. So now you can literally get the wealth of technology from around the world, the perspectives from technology. This is exactly what Tim Pool is doing with Subverse right now. And you're starting to even see Philip DeFranco, he's expanding as well. And they are actually starting to leverage different folks within the community. And of course, it's is it a perfect system? No, we're all imperfect creatures. The big thing is CNN, I really think they missed the boat on that. And it's very unfortunate. And I think a lot of it has to do with groupthink and stuff. And one of the reasons why I say this is, and I said this in my video, I had an opportunity where I could have joined the Proud Boys. Mm-hmm. I didn't. Why didn't I? Because It wasn't over the breakfast cereals. I actually really like cereal, but it was over the oath that you had to pledge. All I remember was I'm not going to swear an oath to that. I don't believe in that. That just makes sense. However, I watched as other individuals there were doing that, and I'm not going to lie. If you got a bunch of folks and you're having a decent time and stuff, you want to be part of the group. You want to feel accepted and stuff. So I do feel that is a driving force, especially if you have somebody that's maybe in a highly emotionally charged state. You have folks getting into each other's faces. People react differently, especially if you've never really been in a fight or something. It's like all of a sudden someone does something a little bit, or maybe they're just going to fake back. The other person just completely cold cocks them because at that point, that's assault. They're fearing they're going to get hurt. The other person's like, well, I thought only assault was when you actually touch somebody so I could get away. So, I mean, there could be a million different things going on in another person's head, especially if you don't really see the person. If you just have a mask on, then you're just seeing, like what you said, the enemy. You're not seeing another human being.
So I think that what the point you're bringing forward is, it's a psychological explanation, and I think it's a valid psychological explanation. It has no, I don't think it has any legal justification to it, or even ethical, because it's the same issue you'll hear in countries over in, for example, Egypt, where you have rape mobs where, a woman will get, sexually assaulted by a couple people in a crowd, and then like boom, 16 or 17 of them crowd up and start like humping her and shit like that. And a lot of these,
I thought that was in India. I'm sorry to.
it's also, yeah, it's India too, but all I remember it happened to Lara Logan, the journalist, during the Tahrir Square demonstrations in what was it, 2011. So yeah, it does happen in India. It happens in a lot of these countries around the world, and they could use the same excuse. They'd say, look, I was watching this happen. I've never been involved in anything like this. I was just, getting my jimmies on, and it's the same issue. Okay, these people, it's actually worse if you think about it, because these people came there with a conscious notion that they're there to fight against fascists, and that may be what's in their mind, but it's a delusion. It's not legally true, because when you assault a bystander, you're assaulting a bystander. You're not assaulting the enemy. So anyway, let me see here. I think I am going to wrap up, but thanks to Memes for calling. We had a chat on Sunday. You can find his channel. It's the Memes of Destruction on YouTube. We also had, Larry called with his cat and with Cher. And see you later, Memes. I'll talk to you later. We also had who was it? Desert Mav called in. I think that's about it. We have Arjun in the chat. Sorry, Arjun. I think I'm going to close down for the day. So, yeah, we're doing pretty poorly as a country in terms of civil discourse. But thank you for joining me. I did want to have a little more time today because I didn't do any uploads this week aside for, a suspicious call from a certain athlete to Anthony Logan. But that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on BitChute and on Minds.com, as well as on, what's the other one? The other one is, BitChute, Minds, and Subscribe Star if you want to donate. That's the most important one. Fork it over, bitches. Those are all with the screen name, @ChefLeopard. You can also find me on Gab, @Starscream85. If you want to join me on Parler, which is basically a desert of nothing, it's @Razor Ray. And I'll talk to you later. Here's some more music.